Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And this time, our source material has got a theme going.
Okay.
It's all about language learning.
Oh, cool.
So we've got one piece about fun activities to do while learning Spanish, and then another piece that's more like guidelines, looking at language proficiency more broadly.
Yeah.
So we're going to take all of that, and we're going to figure out how we actually measure progress in language learning.
Okay.
What does it even mean to be fluent?
Right. Because people always talk about fluency as like, whoa, like it's this final destination. But in reality, there's this whole system for understanding the different levels of mastery.
Yeah, let's talk about that system. I'm super curious about the ACTFL Proficiency Guidelines.
Okay.
What are they all about?
So the ACTFL guidelines are essentially a standardized way of describing what someone can do with the language.
Okay.
So it moves away from things like how many years you've studied or what textbook level you're at. And instead it looks at your actual real world communication skill.
I like that.
It's like a
practical.
Yeah. You can think of it as like a universal GPS for language learning. It helps you understand where you are on your journey and then chart a course to where you want to go.
I like that GPS analogy.
Yeah.
So this applies to any language you might be learning, right?
Exactly. Whether you're learning Spanish, Swahili, Klingon, understanding these levels can be a game changer.
So how does this whole system work? Take me through it.
Well, it's a spectrum that ranges from novice to superior. Imagine it like climbing a mountain.
Okay.
You start at base camp with the basics, and then each level that you reach represents a new vista point, with broader views and more challenging terrain.
So at the novice level, you're just starting out. You're getting to grips with the basics.
Yeah.
This is where you're learning to introduce yourself. Count to 10. Maybe order a coffee. Simple things.
Simple things.
But such important building blocks.
And what's fascinating here is that even at this early stage, you're starting to experience the cognitive benefits of language learning. Your brain is forming all these new connections, and you're training yourself to think in a different way.
You're absolutely right. It's amazing how quickly you can start to feel those benefits. But I'm curious, when you move up to the intermediate level, what kind of shift happens?
At the intermediate level, you're starting to have more real conversations about familiar topics.
Yeah.
So describing your daily routine.
Yeah.
Talking about hobbies.
Yeah.
Ordering food with more confidence. That sort of thing.
You're not just surviving.
Yeah, you're moving from simply surviving to actually thriving.
Yeah. It's that exciting moment when you can have a genuine back and forth, right?
Yes.
Not just relying on memorized phrases.
Yeah.
But actually constructing your own thoughts.
Yeah.
Expressing them.
Absolutely. And as you reach the advanced level, things get really interesting. You can delve into more complex scenarios like navigating a travel mishap or giving a presentation. You're using a wider range of vocabulary and grammar, expressing yourself more spontaneously, and maybe even starting to think in the language, which opens up a whole new way of understanding the world.
Wow. Thinking in another language.
Yeah.
That's such a cool concept. So we've gone from novice to intermediate to advanced. What does it take to reach the peak, the superior level?
This is where you've truly mastered the language.
Okay.
You can express nuanced opinions, debate complex issues, even adapt your language for different audiences. Imagine yourself giving a presentation or writing a research paper in your target language.
Wow.
It's the level where you can truly unlock the power of language to achieve your goals.
That's incredible. I'm curious, though, some people might say that these ACTFL levels are too focused on academic language, maybe not as relevant for everyday use.
That's a fair point.
What are your thoughts?
While the ACTFL guidelines were originally developed for educational settings, they can absolutely be applied to real-world contexts as well. Ultimately, they are about describing your ability to communicate effectively, regardless of the situation.
So how does this all play out here in Texas? How does our education system approach these proficiency levels?
Interestingly, the Texas education system actually aligns with the ACTFL guidelines. The Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or STAS for languages, put a heavy emphasis on developing those real-world communication skills we've been discussing.
So whether you're a student in a Texas classroom or someone learning independently, having a grasp of these levels can be super valuable. But language isn't just about speaking, right? There are different ways we actually use it to communicate.
Precisely. That's where the three modes of communication come in.
Okay.
Presentational, interpretive, and interpersonal. They're like different tools in your language toolkit. Host speaker.
Okay, let's unpack these modes. What exactly do we mean by presentational communication?
So think of presentational communication as any time you're conveying information or ideas to an audience.
Okay.
You're the one sharing,
Yeah.
and they're receiving. So it could be giving a presentation, writing an essay, creating a video, or even something like performing in a play in your target language.
So it's about expressing yourself
Yeah.
clearly and effectively in a one-way flow of information.
Yeah.
Okay, but interpretive communication is more about receiving information, right?
That's right. It's about understanding and making meaning from the language coming at you,
Yeah.
whether it's listening, reading, or watching. You're the receiver, not the sender. And it can be a bit like solving a puzzle because you have to piece together the meaning from the language cues you have.
So that could be anything from listening to a podcast to reading a news article in your target language.
Exactly.
It's about active engagement, even though you're not the one speaking.
Yeah.
But then we have interpersonal, which I imagine is all about those two-way conversations.
Exactly. Interpersonal communication is about engaging with others in real time, exchanging ideas, asking questions, building relationships. And it's probably the most dynamic mode because you have to be adaptable, understanding what's being said to you, while also formulating your own thoughts and expressing them clearly.
It's almost like a dance, this constant back and forth between listening and responding.
Yeah.
So we've got these three modes, and we've got this framework of proficiency levels. How can our listener actually use all of this to become a better language learner?
Well, I'd say the biggest takeaway is that understanding these concepts lets you personalize your approach.
Okay.
You can pinpoint your strengths and weaknesses, set realistic goals, and choose activities that fit your current level and what you want to achieve.
Okay, so let's say I'm a total beginner just starting out on this language learning adventure.
Yeah.
How can this framework help me?
First of all, don't be afraid to embrace the novice level. It's about building that strong foundation, mastering the basics like greetings introductions and simple phrases. Think of it like learning the alphabet before trying to write a novel.
Yeah, it's all about those building blocks. But how can you make sure you're moving forward in a way that's actually effective?
Setting realistic goals is key. Instead of getting overwhelmed by this huge goal of fluency, break it down into smaller, achievable steps. Maybe you want to be able to order a coffee in your target language by the end of the month, or have a short conversation with a language partner by the end of the semester.
Having those milestones can definitely keep you motivated. What about activities? How do you choose the right activities to match your level and goals?
It's all about finding that sweet spot where you're challenged, but not overwhelmed if you're at the novice level. Focus on things that reinforce the basics, like listening to children's songs, watching simple cartoons, or using flashcard apps. As you move into intermediate territory, you can graduate to podcasts, TV shows with subtitles, or even graded readers.
So it's almost like leveling up in a video game, moving to tougher challenges as you gain experience. What about when you get to the advanced level?
That's when you can really dive into authentic materials.
Okay.
Novels, films, maybe even academic articles.
Wow.
The key is to find resources that stretch your abilities without making you want to pull your hair out.
You know, it's interesting. There's so much emphasis these days on finding the perfect language learning method.
Right.
But it sounds like what you're saying is
Absolutely.
that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another. Experiment with different activities, different resources.
Okay.
Maybe you're a visual learner who thrives on flashcards and diagrams. Or maybe you're an auditory learner who loves listening to music and podcasts. The important thing is to find what resonates with you and makes language learning a part of your daily life.
And I'm guessing this is where those three modes of communication come into play.
Yeah.
Knowing your strengths and weaknesses within those modes can help you focus your efforts.
Exactly. Say you're struggling with speaking. You might dedicate more time to activities that build interpersonal communication skills.
Okay.
Things like conversation practice, maybe even role-playing. Or if you're finding it tough to understand written texts, you might lean more into interpretive activities like reading articles or watching movies with subtitles.
It's about tailoring your approach, right?
Precisely. Figure out your weak points and tackle them head on. And don't forget about your strengths. Even if you're already a great speaker, it's important to keep developing those interpretive and presentational skills as well.
Because all three modes are interconnected in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like being a strong reader can actually make you a better writer, and being a good listener can help you become a better speaker.
That's a great point. All these skills feed into each other, so it's important to work on them in tandem. The ultimate goal, after all, is not just to learn the language, but to actually use it, to connect with others, experience different cultures, and broaden your horizons.
So let's say I'm planning a trip to a country where my target language is spoken. How can understanding these ACTFL levels and communication modes help me prepare for that experience?
Well, first of all, knowing your target level can help set realistic expectations for what you'll be able to do during your trip.
Okay.
If you're at the novice level, you might focus on learning basic phrases for greetings, ordering food, asking for directions.
And if you're at the intermediate level, you might aim for more extended conversations with locals, asking for recommendations, sharing a bit about yourself.
And if you're at the advanced level, you might feel comfortable navigating more complex situations, like discussing local customs, maybe even negotiating prices, or giving a presentation in your target language.
So understanding your current level helps you prioritize the skills you need most.
Yeah.
But it's not just about practical communication, is it?
Right.
There's a whole cultural element to language learning as well.
Absolutely. Language and culture are inextricably linked. As you're learning the language, you're also gaining insights into a new culture, its customs, values, ways of thinking. That cultural awareness can be just as important as language proficiency.
Yeah.
When it comes to successful communication.
So much of what we've talked about connects to that idea of gaining a deeper understanding of another culture through language. What are some ways our listener can build that cultural awareness alongside their language skills?
Well, there's so many paths you could take, like reading books and articles about the culture, watching films and documentaries, even just listening to music and podcasts can give you a feel for the place. And of course, connecting with native speakers, either online or in person, can be incredibly valuable.
Yeah. I've always found that people are generally excited to share their culture and perspectives with those who are genuinely interested. But cultural awareness is more than just knowing facts and figures, right?
Right. It's not about turning culture into some kind of checklist. It's about cultivating empathy and understanding, recognizing that different cultures have different ways of doing things, different ways of communicating, different ways of seeing the world, and ultimately respecting those differences, even if you don't always agree with them.
That's such a great point. It's about approaching another culture with humility and a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about the ultimate goal of language learning, connection, experience, broadening your horizons. It's not just about acquiring a skill. It's about transforming yourself in a way.
It really is. It's about opening your mind to new perspectives and new possibilities, connecting with others on a deeper level, and honestly becoming a more well-rounded and compassionate human being.
That's beautifully put. I want to leave our listener with one final thought. Imagine yourself at that superior level of proficiency we talked about. What could you achieve with that level of mastery? What doors would it open?
The possibilities are truly endless when you think about it.
Yeah.
Working or studying abroad, building meaningful relationships with people from all over the world, accessing a whole universe of information and resources that were previously closed off to you. You could even find yourself contributing to your field in a whole new way, bringing a unique perspective that wouldn't have been possible without that language mastery.
You could become a bridge between cultures, a voice for the underrepresented, a champion for understanding and collaboration. That's the power of language.
And it's a power that's within your reach. It's not about being perfect. It's about progress, about consistently pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. Keep that passion for language alive, and who knows, maybe someday you'll be sharing your own language learning journey, inspiring others to embark on their own adventures.
What a great note to end on.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing yourself to new heights. You never know what amazing things you might discover along the way.